Joe Biden's House of Cards. In my previous video, I focused on President Biden's use of a cue card while meeting with Israeli President Rivlin. With some feedback from viewers of that video, I think it would be useful to explore Biden's history with such reference material. When I was a teenager, back in the 80s, we used to have what was called investigative reporters. These brave men and women would put their foot in the doors of the powerful and hold them accountable to the taxpayers that pay their salaries and buy their products. That all changed when the corporate media decided that they would make more money serving the Democratic Party and the global elites. Now, if an investigative reporter goes undercover to gather information about Planned Parenthood or CNN, they are now taken to court where they are prosecuted by Democrat attorney generals like Kamala Harris and Xavier Becerra of California. So why am I making these videos about Biden's House of Cards? Because ordinary citizens have to do the job that the news media used to do. But instead, it's ordinary people like us who have to hold the powerful accountable, because nobody else is. So let's briefly return to Biden's card with Israeli President Rivlin. In Biden's notes, every point begins with the word I, or things like I and my team. This is peculiar on many levels. If you write a note to yourself about things you want to mention in a meeting with an important person, would you really write it as, I will ensure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon? Or would you just say, ensure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon? Also, if this card was written by a member of Biden's staff, how presumptuous of that staff member to make these editorial choices for President Biden. And you can in fact see where Biden has marked up the card handed to him by staff. But it is just very weird that staff members were told to write this entire card from the first person perspective and not the third person perspective. So I've received some feedback on the fact that other presidents use reference materials prepared for them by their staff. I am not accusing Joe Biden of using reference materials prepared by underlings. That would be ridiculous. I am saying that Joe Biden is using cue cards, cheat sheets, and reference notes in a manner unlike any of his modern predecessors. Alright, so the first criticism I received, reference cards used by Donald Trump. There's just a slight problem. Every one of these reference cards was clearly written by President Trump himself as reminders of things that he wanted to get out as his points. Complaint number 2. Laughing out loud. Simple explanation of the ridiculousness of creating partisan faux rage over the most basic things everyone does. A politician had notes. The horror. Well, it's in how President Biden uses these notes. Here's a photo from 2020. Joe Biden is the Democrat Party nominee. Most of the people on this list are the same reporters tasked with following primary candidate Biden around in 2019 and then continuing that role once he was the nominee. These reporters have followed Biden to every campaign stop across the country, whether by road or by air travel, sometimes traveling with him within the same bus or flight. Even reporters that Biden has not called on for questions he should know. For instance, Peter Doocy of Fox News followed Biden to all of these stops, yet Biden never once called on him for a question or even once granted an interview to Fox News. Yet Biden should still have been able to recognize this blonde young man. Why does Biden need color photos to associate names with a face before him? Remember, this photo is Biden facing an array of the press. Why does Biden need color pictures to remind him the face he sees in front of him with the name in question so that he doesn't talk to reporters who will ask tough questions, I guess is the reason. It is a valid question to consider whether all Biden notes are equally the same. Every president since Eisenhower has had professional speechwriters prepping them for live appearances. What do Biden's notes tell us? Here's a note card titled The President, Infrastructure, with a series of dry talking points so that the president doesn't get hung up on trivial details. This example here shows something that every president has utilized in order to appear more cogent before the press. I have no issue with that, but trying to conflate all Biden cue cards into this particular cue card is not factual. Look instead at this note on Biden selecting Kamala Harris as his running mate. This note is very odd for several reasons. It has perfect penmanship. There's not one mistake, not one doodle, not one jot. A staff member with excellent handwriting wrote this. The notepad may say his name, maybe to help him remember his own name, but this was not written by Joe Biden. Note that the above notepad lacks any references using the word I to refer to himself. This cue card is crucial to me in understanding the cue card used by Biden on the visit of Israeli President Rivlin. That cue card had nothing but I's, meaning that Joe was supposed to say those lines out loud for the cameras. So either the Rivlin cue card was written by staff, or the Kamala Harris cue card was written by staff. One of these is Biden's preference, his habit, if he writes these notes to himself. That's a given. If I were to guess, and this is speculation, I would say that two different staffers wrote the two notes. And I think that by the time Israeli President Rivlin visited 5 months into Biden's presidency, Joe Biden told his staff that he was no longer able to understand third-person notes like the Kamala notepad, and that he needed to see his quotes verbatim as he needed to say them. Not to sound ominous, but the close-up photos of Biden's Rivlin cue card are no longer available on any image search engine I try. Isn't that funny? Finally, we have one that appears to be the closest to what Biden would actually have as a handwritten note to himself. This is from Biden's first press conference as president. I'm not a handwriting expert, but the K on this notebook in his hands is not the same as the K on the Kamala Harris note. It's possible he wrote neither of these, but let's give Biden the benefit of a doubt that this notebook is his own writing. While I was searching for these examples, I remembered the story from last year where Biden had called Harris on a teleconference call to congratulate her on his choice, making her his vice presidential running mate. He has a script in front of him. Let's take a closer look at that here. This is the most bizarre example of Joe Biden relying on a script written for him by others. When Joe Biden made his personal, professional selection of Kamala Harris to be his running mate, there are a number of oddities about this selection. During the live Skype call, where Joe Biden supposedly informs Kamala Harris that very moment that she is going to be his running mate, Joe Biden is holding an iPhone up, which appears to be of an unidentified third person on the call. Also, beneath Biden's hands is a script containing the words, "I'm calling you today because." So, why is it that Joe Biden, when he makes this selection, needs a script in front of him that reads, "I've decided I would like you to join this effort to win back the soul of our country and be our nation's next vice president. I think you are entitled to know why I chose you. There are 3 reasons." What's bizarre about this is that from all appearances, out of the entire Biden team, Joe Biden, the candidate himself, seems to be the very last person to know out of his entire team that he has selected Kamala Harris as his running mate. She called him a racist during the Democrat primaries. Why did he decide to choose her? We don't know, because it looks like the decision was made for him. And if you're making that decision, why do you need a script in front of you detailing the reasons why you picked her? So just because prior presidents before Biden had staffers handing them notes does not mean Biden is above criticism for how he relies on these notes himself. I personally feel some remorse pointing out Biden's mental deficiencies as a candidate and as president. But then I remember Biden spending all of 2020 calling Donald Trump a mass murderer, calling Donald Trump cold-hearted, indifferent to people's suffering.
Over these past few months, there has been so much pain, so much suffering, so much loss. Over 225,000 dead Americans because of the negligence and the consequence of COVID. Donald Trump has waved the white flag, abandoned our families, and surrendered to the virus. But the American people don't give up. We don't give in, and we surely don't cower, and nor will I under any circumstances. I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm not going to shut down the country, but I'm going to shut down the virus.
And then I remember that this selfish, bitter, brittle piece of Democrat deserves every bit of criticism he gets as president. Joe Biden lied his way into office, and regardless of his mental problems, he now has a job that he lied his way into, where he called his predecessor a mass murderer every week for all of 2020. Thank you.